All right, back to our breaking news this hour. President Trump telling Fox News in a brand new interview he respects Russian President Vladimir Putin and acknowledges Putin may be a killer, but also adds that a lot of people are killers. Here's the president in his own words.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you? Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Let's debate it. Robert Jones is with us, the CEO and founder of the Public Religion Research Institute. Betsy Woodruff is a politics reporter for the Daily Beast. Nice to have you both here. All right, we just heard the analysis from our Jim Sciutto and also Jill Doherty in Moscow. Betsy, the question becomes, how are U.S. allies supposed to read this, especially on a day that President Trump just had a call with the president of Ukraine?
That's a very good question for U.S. allies. Of course, we know that many of these foreign governments are really scrambling to figure out how to make sense of the things that Donald Trump says and does. And I thought Jill made a really important point in that last block about the fact that there seems to be significant dissonance between what Trump's team at the UN are doing when it comes to Russian incursions into the Ukraine, but what Trump himself is saying in these interviews. It's a massive gap even within the Trump administration itself, and that's deeply confusing.
I think that's a really important point, because Nikki Haley, the ambassador to the United Nations, in her confirmation hearing and then again in her comments about Russia at the United Nations, took a much more aggressive approach when it comes to how the U.S. should respond and how wary the U.S. should be of Russia. Rex Tillerson just confirmed as Secretary of State along the same lines, as well as General Mattis. Robert, how should our allies read this? The divide that Betsy points out, seemingly between the president and his team.
Well, it's confusing. I think that Donald Trump continues in many ways to be his own enemy here by giving these conflicting statements. And I think most importantly here, it is without really any reason, really lowering the moral bar and really dispensing with American ideals here. I mean, one of the great, things that he talks about, make America great again. He referred to in his inaugural address a city set on a hill, this kind of biblical illusion. That's always been about moral power and about leading by moral example. And he's just sort of like thrown that under the bus with this latest comment.
Let's also listen to another excerpt that we just got. This is from the big interview that the president did with Bill O'Reilly that will air during the Super Bowl tomorrow. Here is where O'Reilly pushed him on facts.
Is there any validity to the criticism of you that you say things you can't back up factually? And as the president, if you say, for example, that there are 3 million illegal aliens who voted, and then you don't have the data to back it up, some people are going to say that's irresponsible for a president to say that. Is there any validity to that?
Many people have come out and said I'm right. You know that.
I know, but you got to have data to back that up.
Let me just tell you, when you see illegals, people that are not citizens, and they're on the registration rolls. Look, Bill, we can be babies, but you take a look at the registration. You have illegals, you have dead people, you have this. It's really a bad situation. It's really bad.
Betsy, to you, I mean, he actually didn't answer O'Reilly's question there.
No, not at all. And the fact is that Trump and his team are really factually challenged. Just earlier this week, I obtained emails from Customs and Border Protection that showed that hundreds of people were immediately directly impacted by the travel ban. That email was sent out at 6:30 a.m. on Monday, several hours later when Sean Spicer, Trump's press secretary, had a media availability, had his daily press briefing. He told reporters that only 109 people were slowed down by the travel ban. And of course, we learned just in the last day or two that in fact, tens of thousands of people had their visas revoked because of the travel ban. Despite that, the entire Trump administration, not just Trump himself, have worked overtime to just distract people from the reality, from the facts of the situation. And as reporters, it's really hard because it means that you can't take any statement at face value from Trump and his team. There's just a massive trust deficit. And that's a huge, interesting challenge for covering this administration.
Robert, you made an interesting point, just sort of a bigger picture point about what this does to the future of the GOP and what you call generational divides. Explain.
Well, I think one of the real questions to ask is what impact is this administration going to have on younger Americans? And we have some, recent data, even from a recent CNN poll, that shows there may be a real future shock here for the Republican Party. We had 2/3 of millennials saying they disapprove of the job performance of President Trump. We have 2/3 who oppose this travel ban. We have 8 in 10 who oppose the building of a wall, staunchly lined up against the kind of key things that the Trump administration is pushing very, very hard in the early administration. One of the things we know from the political science literature is that each generation actually tends to set its political preferences in their sort of teens and 20s, and that stays with them throughout their life. It's hard to move people off the mark that they set in their early adulthood. And we could be looking at the most anti-Republican generation, and it could be a completely self-inflicted wound by the Republican Party.
What do you expect, Betsy, from Republicans in Congress? Obviously, there have been some who've been more outspoken against the president, like John McCain, like Senator John McCain, like Senator Lindsey Graham. But do you expect, especially given these Putin and Russia comments putting the U.S. on a moral equivalency with Russia in that interview, do you expect, more outcry from some Republicans in Congress?
Keep an eye on Paul Ryan. I would expect him to have some sort of comment, either pointedly or obliquely, pushing back against the president because of this. Remember, about a month ago when President Obama rolled out new sanctions against Russia, Paul Ryan really praised him for that. He said he thought it was a good decision that was long overdue. So he's definitely not in the camp of let's all get along with Russia and Putin's a great guy. That's not the way Paul Ryan thinks about the world. There's going to be a lot of focus on him, particularly from rank and file members of the House Republican Conference, to sort of get a sense of what tone the party as a whole is going to take on this issue, especially given the president, almost for all practical purposes, appearing to draw an equivalency between the U.S. and Russia when it comes to human rights issues. So I think Paul Ryan is probably the most important voice here on how the Republican Party as a whole is going to respond.
All right, Robert Jones, Betsy Woodruff, nice to have you both on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up next.
This is CNN Breaking News.
It is the top of the hour. I'm Boris Sanchez in Atlanta, and this is a special live edition of CNN Newsroom. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. We start with breaking news. You're looking at live pictures from Palm Beach, Florida, where protesters are taking to the streets near President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, where he's spending the weekend. Most are carrying signs and props to protest his controversial travel ban affecting refugees and citizens in 7 Muslim-majority countries. You see the police presence is already there. Just a few hours ago, the Justice Department formally challenged a federal judge's decision to temporarily block that ban. People who support the president have also had a presence there in the crowds gathered in Palm Beach. They were yelling at each other, a standoff just a few moments ago. We'll go live to South Florida in just a moment. But first, some startling words from the president on Russia, especially that country's president, Vladimir Putin. President Trump not denying that Putin may be a killer, and then he added something cryptic, saying that there are a lot of killers. Listen to this.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you?
But
Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We get a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
We have a panel to discuss these remarkable comments from the president. Political analyst Selena Zito, New York Times contributor Wajahat Ali, and our former Moscow bureau chief, Jill Doherty. Jill, to you first. President Trump has often said that he respects Vladimir Putin, but I want to hear your reaction to that line about killers, saying that our country is asking if our country is so innocent. That's unlike anything we've ever heard from an American president before.
Yes. In fact, Boris, from a president, and I think that's the important point here, that, he has said this before, but he wasn't the president. He said it back in December of 2015 to MSNBC when he was a candidate. He said our country does a lot of killing, or plenty of killing too. But now he is the president of the United States. And to hear this coming out of his mouth to many people is extremely shocking. I mean, I think you just have to ask yourself, does he believe this? Or is he kind of on autopilot saying the things that he has said before as a candidate. Because, you know, when he said, I respect him, we're going to get along, I don't know if we're going to get along, but if Russia helps fight terrorism, that's a good thing. He said all of that, too. So does he really believe that the United States is equivalent to what Vladimir Putin is doing? And if he does believe it, then what are the examples? I mean, I think that is a legitimate question that now should be asked of the president. What killing does he have in mind? Is it equal to, let's say, what is going on with Russia's actions in Aleppo, or what Russia did in Grozny and Chechnya? Or, again, is he just recycling a whole lot of old campaign comments, not realizing the effect of his words as President of the United States?
Selena, the timing of this is also really curious, considering just a few days ago, the ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, bashed Russia in front of the United Nations. Also, you have several Republican lawmakers that have come out saying that we need to enforce stronger sanctions against Russia. Among them, Senator John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio. How do they handle this kind of cozying up to Vladimir Putin moving forward?
Well, the president employs what I personally call the Law and Order throwaway line. Law and Order is a show that ran forever, is still running on NBC. And in the beginning of every segment, there was always a sort of inappropriate throwaway line that marked the show. And he tends to do that when he speaks. It's part of his cadence. It's part of his personality. You know, many people had thought that he would stop that as president, but I don't think he's going to. You know, there's a couple of things going on. I think maybe it's more part of his style than him thinking, you know, sort of long game about, you know, what he is saying as president. You know, as you said, Nikki Haley came out strong this week at the United Nations. He also had a conversation today with the president of the Ukraine. And they talked about the problems with Russia, and he talked about, this was in the readout from the White House, and he also talked about having negotiations with Russia about the situation in Ukraine. So I think it's more a throwaway line than anything else.
We have one more guest to add to our panel. Senior political analyst David Gergen is joining us over the phone. David, you've worked for several administrations, for presidents. What do you make of this? Is there something that we're not getting about these comments that Donald Trump gets when he says that America, or implies that America is not so innocent?
Well, let me acknowledge up front that I haven't seen the full transcript. I've seen snippets of it, but I think it's enough the snippets are enough to really be upsetting in one sense. American presidents, the American government for years has had a very clear understanding that there is no moral equivalence between the kind of authoritarian dictatorship that's emerging in Russia, that has emerged under Vladimir Putin, with the kind of leadership that we expect in America and the standards we hold people to. And it may well be a throwaway line. That you can call it a throwaway line, but you know what? Presidents are not permitted throwaway lines that get us into, that are very confusing, suggest things that we don't want to think are true. And the job of the president is to be careful, be deliberative, to say what needs to be saying, but to leave it there. And these throwaway lines are continually getting him into a lot of trouble. I would point out that what's been happening, even in the last 24 hours, is that his team around him is increasingly saying things that are more mainstream, but he then has these, quote, throwaway lines, and he has his Twitter storms that say just the opposite, that are on the extremes, that attack the judge today, that attack again the New York Times and that sort of thing. And they really undercut it's not just the credibility of the United States, but they throw into question the quality of our leadership. And it confuses the world, and it confuses Americans, and it leads one to suspect that maybe he does think it was somehow that Putin is on the same plane as American leadership. If so, we really need to know that.
Wajahat, to you, to touch on something that David just mentioned about confusion in the world. What do you think the Middle East hears when they hear Donald Trump speak well of Vladimir Putin, especially considering what we've seen unfold in Syria over the past few years?
Let me be very blunt. There's a reason why people are calling him Putin's poodle. And David made a good point. If you look at Donald Trump's Twitter account, he has tweeted against John Lewis, civil rights icon, Republican senators, the CIA, Hamilton the musical, not once against Vladimir Putin. And so I challenge Donald Trump on CNN right now, one tweet criticizing Putin. He won't do it. And also Americans forget that Russia did a criminal hack of our elections, allegedly to tilt it towards Trump. And our intelligence agencies right now are investigating certain connections between allegedly people in Trump's campaign and Russia. That includes National Security Advisor Flynn. Now, Donald Trump supposedly parrots a lot of Putin's talking points. He wants to, essentially, he says NATO is obsolete. Who else thinks that? Putin. He's okay with the EU going away. Who else thinks that? Putin. He wants to reduce the sanctions. Who else wants that? Putin. And so for Americans right now, and this is very serious, why does Donald Trump, who wants to ban innocent refugees and innocent legal visa holders from Muslim majority countries who are our doctors, who work for us, who are students, he wants to ban them, but he's okay with a murderer and a tyrant in Vladimir Putin?
Jill, to you now, you have to think that some of our NATO allies are hearing this and they have to be concerned about these comments.
Oh, I think concerned is really an understatement. I think many people will probably be appalled by these comments, especially people who live in countries that were formerly part of the Soviet Union. It's very hard to wrap your head about this. So, why is he doing it, and what is the effect? You have, at this point, a completely convoluted approach to Russia and as they call it, the former Soviet space, the countries that are in that area, even Ukraine. The first day, his spokesperson from the State Department came out and didn't even mention, I believe it was Crimea. It was a very soft comment about Russia and Ukraine. Then Nikki Haley comes out very hard. And then I was just checking the statement from the White House about the conversation between President Trump and President Poroshenko of Ukraine. No mention of Crimea. So what does this administration really think about Russia? Is there actually a policy? And this is a disturbing thing to think, that no policy has yet been worked out, no coherent policy. Does he have a National Security Council that is studying this and coming up with one idea, one approach, or is it all just throwing it up in the air and seeing what sticks? I think this comment, especially about the killing, is really basically pandering by the president. You know, sometimes when you're a business person and you're in negotiations and you kind of want to pander to the other person, get them on your side, you say something, well, we all do this. You know, yeah, that's the world. We all do this. And that's can be an effective technique when you're a businessman. But when you are the head of the United States, that is extraordinarily dangerous.
Yeah, I'm not sure many people in our armed forces would necessarily agree that we all do what Russia has been doing, especially the last few years in Syria. Jill, David, Selena, and Wajahat, we appreciate the time on this Saturday night. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspectives. Some startling words from President Donald Trump this weekend on Russia and that country's President Vladimir Putin. President Trump not denying that Putin may be a killer, and then adding something that's raising a lot of eyebrows and an implication that is certainly cryptic. He says there are a lot of killers. Listen to this.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you?
But
Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We get a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Let's get to Jill Doherty. She's a CNN contributor who was our Moscow bureau chief for several years. Jill, in the hours since that short clip was released, the reaction from analysts, foreign policy experts that we've talked to has been one of alarm, not just that President Trump would double down on his claims of respect for Vladimir Putin only a few days after the ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, blasted him in front of the United Nations, but now also the fact that he's suggesting that both countries have killers. Are you surprised by this?
I am shocked by it. I'm not surprised by it because Mr. Trump, President Trump, said that during the campaign back in 2015 in December. He had another interview at that point. It was with MSNBC. And he said, our country does plenty of killing too. So he has said this before, but he said it as a candidate at that point, and now he's saying it as President of the United States. And it is extremely undermining of the United States and its position around the world to say that it essentially is a country of killers. This is something that you would actually hear from, let's say, Russia and some of Russian propaganda, the media, et cetera, who would make that point, that the United States has no morality, that it goes around the world killing people and disrupting. But you don't expect that to hear that from the President of the United States.
Right. Another thing President Trump said was that it's better to get along with Russia than not. Is it really that black and white? We either get along with Russia or we don't? It seems like an oversimplification.
Well, it is an oversimplification, but this, again, is something that the president has said many, many times. I mean, that is essentially, Boris, his mantra. Yes, I respect President Putin. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if we got along together and we could fight terrorism together. I don't know how I'll actually ultimately get along with him, but boy, we should work to fight terrorism. We've heard this for now like a year. But I think the question is, at this point, what exactly does that mean? If you're going to work with Russia, let's have some specifics. Where is the policy? And this is where we don't hear anything. In fact, you pointed out, there comments by Nikki Haley, who is the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, really laying into Russia for the action and the fighting in Ukraine, saying that sanctions are going to continue as long as they occupy Crimea. That's diametrically opposed to what President Trump has been saying. So where is the policy? Specifically, what is he going to do? It's really, at this point, very, very confusing. Yeah,
and after her comments, the White House seemingly backed her up. So it's really a curious comment to make. Jill Doherty in Moscow, thank you so much. Still to come.